All right, well, we would like to welcome everyone to the webinar today. This is hosted by the IM Foundation. I am Paul Feiereisen, the founder of the foundation. Today we've got a fantastic panel of experts, as they are, talking about well-being. And so what we're going to discuss is kind of the transition that we've seen, in and around education and COVID and everything that's been happening over the past few months, what that's looking like as we move into summer and have educators also transitioning into what will be the new type of school that their district decides to implement moving forward in the fall. On the call today we have Dr. Jean Clinton. She's absolutely fabulous. We've really fallen in love with her and excited to have her on the panel. Also Stephan Groot from Brivia Consulting, Jennifer Bitton, an assistant principal at Westlake High School in Saratoga Springs, Utah, and Miriam Stevenson, the student services director over Palo Alto Unified School District in California. We'll just take a minute. I'll just share a little bit about the IM Foundation for those of you who are not aware of it as we continue to kind of grow and strive to make an impact. The IM Foundation was created with the sole purpose of helping the rising generation understand what it means to live a balanced life. And so we focus on 5 key areas, which are physical health, to be able to do the things that we want to do, emotional health, to have real connection in our relationships, both professionally and personally, intellectual growth, that we understand that process should continue for us throughout our life. It doesn't stop when we graduate from high school or college. That we are financially literate and stable, that our financial life is not a distraction from the things that we want to accomplish in life, and that we have spiritual balance, and that means different things to different people. And so our goal is to implement initiatives around these things to help people, again, understand this balance, that they basically understand, how to live a happy life, which is what I would want for myself and my children, what I would want for others and theirs. So we are excited to be growing as an organization and bringing forth solutions like putting wellness centers into schools across the country to minimize issues like suicide and self-harm and other social emotional issues that youth are dealing with nowadays. Growing a $1.5 billion scholarship fund that goes towards all forms of education, collegiate, trade school, entrepreneurial, fine arts, what have you. Putting a financial literacy program into every high school and middle school in the nation so that we have the first fully financially literate generation growing up into adulthood. And also an initiative around physical health, working with wellness coordinators and physicians across the country. So we're very excited to kind of bring those things forward. One thing that some of you may have seen is a conference that we are about to launch in August. The EdWell conference is designed to address the needs around the educator. As we focus a lot of time in supporting the needs of a student transitioning with everything going on with COVID, we've kind of overlooked our educators nationwide or maybe worldwide, and put a lot of pressure and stress on them to transition into these online teaching environments. And so we've pulled together just an amazing group of speakers who can all talk around wellness and what it means, especially in the application in the life of an educator or an administrator in schools. And so we're excited to have people like Dr. Clinton, Sir Ken Robinson, Mark Brackett, Julie Lithcott-Hames, Christine Carter, Amy Blankson, and more. And so we've got full school licensing available. It's highly economical to allow more people to participate and have that impact, but also allowing an individual to register if they'd like to see it by themselves. The content will be available for at least 30 days past the event, which gives a great opportunity for professional development and so forth. So at this time, I'll take a step back, but I'd like to turn the time over to Miriam Stevenson and Jennifer Bitton. They are just absolutely amazing in what they do on their own levels within their districts, and the contributions that they're making, the impact that they're having in their schools and in their communities. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Miriam. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. It's so great to come together and have a collaboration with a foundation that just exists to find solutions that will support educators in helping the rising generation be healthier and have more fulfilled lives. So it's with great honor that we are coming together today to bring a lot of great minds on this topic, because as Paul said, one of the things that we have found as we are searching for solutions to support our students is that essential to that is the well-being of our staff and of our educators. We know that that is, without it, none of the solutions for students' well-being can come to fruition, but hard, and it can be also very lonely. And what's most important is that in those times that educators can lean into each other and onto research to show what they can do to find meaning in their work so that they can sustain and continue to support students in that way. This webinar is the last of our summer series as we prepare for the EdWell conference. And so we're hoping today gives you a small taste of what to expect. A really low cost option for you to be able to join and get a good dose of your own care so that you can face whatever uncertainty that you are going to be encountering as we all take the next steps in this next now. With that said, I have a couple of housekeeping items to also talk about. First of all, questions today will be in the Q&A, and we'll be curating that, and there will be an interactive portion with our guest at the end, so please contribute. We have this up here just to highlight that meaning is really the antidote to burnout, which is really some of what we're facing a lot of right now. We did want to do a better poll to see what you're feeling in this moment. I know it's been a little bit of a long season. I say that very generously, a lot of a long season. So if you can put in the Q&A, we want to test that you're able to access that. What has been your predominant feeling during the past couple of weeks? It'll give us a gauge and help us be able to tailor today's talk to where you are currently, your emotional state. And we also want to check in afterwards to see if this had an impact, hopefully to improve that. Other housekeeping items include that all the information, the recording, the conference information will all be on the IM Foundation website for you to reference. Normally it takes a little bit to get up there, so no worries if you'd like to watch this again or share this with someone. We encourage that, and that will all be found at the IM website. I'll pause for a second, and I'm honored to introduce my great colleague, and I'm going to call her my personal great friend as well, Jennifer Bitton. We became fast friends when our paths crossed as she and the IM Foundation came out to really look at what we are doing in our district to support student well-being. And our schools have faced similar challenges, and it requires a lot of leadership to step into the unknown. So Jennifer Bitton is the head over wellness at her high school, and she's brought the Wellness Center to her high school and also serves at the district level to support social emotional learning and wellness for her district. More importantly, she's a long-term educator who is still surviving and thriving despite what new challenges each day brings. And so it's a great honor. One of the ways we became fast friends is being able to honor that this work can be difficult and that it's important to connect in spaces like this with most recent research, thinking, and colleagues that can help you stay accountable to your own purpose and meaning, as well as your own well-being, and prioritize that for yourselves. So we hope today does a little bit of that for you. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Miriam. I appreciate your kind words. We feel so fortunate today to have these two amazing professionals to learn from and just to have a conversation with as we explore our well-being and finding meaning in uncertainty. And so I wanted just to take a minute to introduce Dr. Jean Clinton and Stephan de Groot. Dr. Clinton is renowned nationally and internationally as an advocate for children's issues. Her special interest lies in brain development and the crucial role relationships and connectedness play therein. Jean champions the development of a national comprehensive child well-being strategy, including a system of early learning and care for young children and their families. She's equally committed to ensuring that children and youth need voices and are heard and respected. Dr. Clinton is a clinical professor, Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences at McMaster, Division of Child Psychiatry. She is on staff at McMaster Children's Hospital with cross appointments in pediatrics and family medicine, and an associate in the Department of Child Psychiatry at the University of Toronto and Sick Children's Hospital. She's a fellow of the Child Trauma Academy as well as 0 to 3 Academy fellow since 2013. She's been a consultant to children and youth mental health programs, child welfare, and primary care for over 30 years, and has served as the education advisor to the Premier of Ontario and the Minister of Education. So welcome, Jean. Thank you so much for being here. Stephan de Groot. Stephan has maintained a very simple and determined mission in his life to make better the lives of as many people as possible. He has dedicated his life work to optimizing human potential towards the greatest possible outcomes for everyone. Steve is the past president of Myriad Consulting, author of Responsive Practice and Responsive Leadership, and founder of the Getting to Better Initiative, international speaker and performance development facilitator. We are so very lucky to have both of these panelists here today so we can learn and have an amazing conversation with them. So Steve, I'd like to turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint here. And you know about us. So that's Jean, that's Steve. I'm going to pass it right over to Jean because we've got a whole bunch of strategies that we want to get to. So Jean, my wonderful friend and colleague, I'm going to throw that over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Steve, and welcome everybody. This is a really exciting opportunity, and we're really pumped to be sharing some ideas and some provocations with you. So here's your first provocation. What you need to know about me is I'm a child psychiatrist, yes, but I'm an upstreamist. You know, Steve and I have worked for many years together and recognized that instead of being in the middle of a stream catching kids 1 or 2 at a time as we can, we need to be going upstream and figuring out why kids are falling in the river in the very first place. So I spend a lot of my time doing webinars such as this and reaching out to educators, because good public education is the way that we're going to have civic society. The other thing is I'm a brain geek. I love the brain. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I am a student of neurosciences. So I always like to give you a provocation to start with. So what we know is that memory plus attention equals learning. So I'm going to give you attention to the following task, and that is, I want, as you listen to Steve and I today, to think about 3 things that were new to you, you didn't know before. 2 things that are so interesting, you're going to continue to research them or share with somebody else, and 1 thing that you'll change about your practice based on the information that we're sharing today. So 3, 2, 1, and we'll check in with you about that. But I want to say a massive thank you to you for the work that you are doing. And Steve and I together have talked about how much you work so hard. Here you are as educators, and you have to shift to this online platform, this virtual platform. But hello, by the way, you still have to be a mom, a dad, a partner. You have to be managing everything. So you don't hear nearly enough. But a huge thank you comes from me, and over to Steve to come from him as well.
Yeah, we thank you, Jean, so much. We know that you'll never, we've worked with teachers long enough to know that you will never be thanked as much as you should be. So we want to say thank you as many times. Thank you, and thank you in as many languages as possible. What you've come to do is to commit your lives and dedicate your lives to those of children and youth is not really a profession, but it's more of a calling. And we think that should be honored, and we're honored that you're trusting us along this side of the journey with you. And speaking of thanks and connecting with your purpose, I want you, or Jean and I want you to think about 3 things right now. This is about resilience. This is about our own well-being. So we want you to take a moment to reflect on three questions. 1 is, what brought you to the education field? What is the thing that brought you here? Now, some of us can end up there by accident, so that's okay if you're one of those people that got sucked into the education vortex to check it out and you're here for a while. That brings me to the second question, which are, what are the things that keep you here? We're talking today about wellness and meaning, and part of that is our purpose. So what are the things that keep you here? We know that everyone here is a human being. And we know that human beings, often we ask ourselves a couple of questions. First, we ask ourselves, why am I doing this? Like, if anybody online has had a rough day, we've asked ourselves that. Sometimes we ask ourselves, why am I still doing this? And it's important to connect to our purpose every single day, because what we found about human beings, and especially educators, we're not free from this, is that when we ask that question and we don't come up with an answer, that day gets tougher. And the day for our students and the people we are with gets tougher. The last question I want you to think about is, what do you hope to accomplish with the students in your care? People get surprised when I say students in your care, not the students that you teach, but the ones that are in your care with you for so long. What is it that you hope to accomplish day to day, month to month, year to year? And we'll talk about why these reflections are so critical to your well-being as we go on. So I want to, since we're on this topic of well-being, I'm going to pass it over to Jean again. We're going to be doing this back and forth to talk about mental well-being and mental well-being.
Great. So thanks for that, Steve. You know, that concept that you've introduced here for us about thinking each day what your purpose is. We know from research that you are well when you have a sense of purpose, when you have a sense of meaning. You're much more likely to be able to battle the things that come along. So one of the research that the WHO, the World Health Organization, landed on was a definition that said that well-being is a state in which an individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. And so what we can see is that it's way more than the absence of illness. It's the presence of what Dan Goleman, that first quote, was talking about, is all about that sense of meaning, that sense of purpose. And here in Canada, we have such huge respect for the First Nations and their teachings. And I have as a guiding principle this from our First Nations mental wellness framework, that well-being is all about having a sense of having balance in your life, as you see with the medicine wheel, but also having a sense of purpose, having hope. And I hope by the end of today that you've got a little bit more of that fragile thing that we call hope from hearing in our conversation together, a sense of belonging and meaning in daily life. So as we're thinking about the kids coming back to school, as we're thinking about our relationship with our children, I'm hoping that from today you're going to be thinking about, well, how do we create a sense of hope, belonging, meaning and purpose in their lives before we start thinking about catching them up? So the next slide really is a provocation to you. I hope you're okay with this. And that is, you know, we had conversations with Miriam and Jen, and we were talking about it's so hard for us in the helping professions, in the education profession, and those who are reaching out to help kids in any way, it's so hard for us to put ourselves on the agenda. And in fact, to talk about self-care sounds like a little bit selfish. That I don't have enough time to do this. I don't even make myself on the list, never mind at the bottom of the list personally. But I want us, the provocation here is to think about shifting. Instead of thinking about it as self-care, to think about it in these two ways. One, that when teachers are well, they are much better with their kids. That when you are well yourself, then you connect with kids in a very different way. So we need to be thinking about self-care as part of professionalism, that it's not taking advantage, but it is absolutely about professionalism. And so well-being hugely, your well-being hugely affects the ability that you have to create connections with kids. So attending to it is so important. And if you get anything from this, it's Steve and I giving you permission. So why? Well, let me tell you some of the research on the backside, the darker side. And that is, we now know that there's such a thing as stress contagion in the classroom. and that the teacher creates the weather in the classroom and regulates that weather. So the stress contagion is all about the fact that science has shown that when teachers' stress is high in burnout, then measures of children's stress is also recorded as high. So there is this contagion. So this is the other reason that we absolutely need to be thinking about it. But by the way, for you leaders in the crowd, the teachers have their weather determined by the leaders in their school and in their district. So think about that one. So what we need to be thinking about, I would say from a neurobiological perspective, is the fact that we need to be building relationships first. Relationships are the ingredients of brain growth and development. Because when we have relationships, then we're able to help kids regulate. We do that by co-regulating them first. Then they're able to regulate their own emotions. And you know, once they're able to regulate, then they're able to access resources that can help them contend with the challenges. And guess what that leads to? It leads to resilience. And isn't that what we're hoping for all of us, to be able to get through these challenging times, be able to access resources? And we're going to give you some for sure. You know, we're going to give you some ideas of how to deal with uncertainty. And why is this? Well, it's all about the brain according to science, and I love it so much. But really, what we know is that up here at the top of the brain, you see the prefrontal cortex. That's the thinking brain. But we know that if your fight or flight, your emotional brain found in the amygdala, if that is activated, then you cannot access memory and learning, and you can't access the prefrontal cortex. So in fact, when you have uncertainty, when you have unpredictability, the brain does not like it. And what that uncertainty does is it leads to having the limbic system, that emotional system, on high alert. Now, I tell you this to think about yourself and your own emotional reactions, and you can go, you know, it's my brain is sensing danger or a threat here. That's when your limbic system goes on guard. But I also think it's going to be really important when the kids are coming back to school, in whatever hybrid model or however that's going to look. We are going to need to be thinking very seriously about what is their limbic system, the activation of that system, and what do we do as teachers, what do you do as educators to bring that limbic system down to quiet? Because what we know is that in a typical response to stress, you're in a calm state, you have a stressful event, that fight or flight, your amygdala is activated, and then your amygdala gets a message from the hippocampus that says, hey, okay, new learning and memory, I know this stuff, it's nothing to be frightened of. The prefrontal cortex kicks in, and boom, down comes the threat, and you have a much calmer state. But we have to be thinking about what is happening, that what are we doing as adults to bring that sense of calm. And that's why we as adults are the bridge, if you like, between the emotional reaction, the dysregulation that the kids are experiencing. We become a co-regulator. The hippocampus is assisted by this with the kids, and we come to calm regulation. But you know what I also want you to think about? Who is your co-regulator? Where is it that you go and seek to get that sense of calm, that sense of balance, that sense of I can be here for you because I have in my back pocket the set of tools that we're going to tell you about that will be helpful. So I hope that's something to think about.
Yeah, lots to think about. And I know, I'm glad this is being recorded because I love listening to Jean speak as well. I almost forgot that I was presenting. Thank you, Jean, so much. I love that, right? Teachers are the calm, they are that barometer, they are the weather system. And I think it's important as well to hold everybody to that gentle accountability, which is Leaders do it for teachers, teachers do it for students, right? And that's what we're looking for. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you to your experience. Gina and I can talk all day long about the research and about concepts and things like that, but we'll take you a moment to think about your greatest team experience ever. We want you to connect with your experience so that the concepts from here make more sense and they're more meaningful. We're going to talk a lot about meaning, a lot about regulation. So I want you to think about your greatest team experience ever. When you were on a team at any point in your life where you felt the best, you did the best. It could be a teaching team, it could be a working team, it could be a sports team, it could be a club. I want you to go back to that moment. I want you to think about what was going on and who was there. What was happening that made that experience so great? There's an interesting thing that our research, and Jean's working with me on something that's very, very awesome, which is our greatest moments. What is held in our greatest moments? Who was there and what was happening? What we've come to understand, when you connect with that experience, I'm going to ask you to think about a couple of questions. Were you clear on your role, why you were there, what your purpose was? Were there other people that you shared the goals with or that you connected with? Did you feel a sense of belonging to that group? Did you trust them and did you feel comfortable? Most people that we talk to say yes to all of those, not just yes, but an emphatic yes. Well, what was happening? Well, one of the things that we've come to see is that human beings do really well when three things are happening, and we call them the three great states. We call them safe, significant, and situated. Now, what we've come to understand is that these are conditions that we can create in the classroom, in relationships. And that's the great news about the three great states, is that we can create them in relationships first, and we can influence them within the environment. So I want you to stick to your greatest experience ever so that you can connect to your own experience for a second. And we'll go through these just one at a time. Well, what is safety? Safety is about feeling physically, emotionally, socially, and mentally safe. It's about having a sense of comfort. It's about security and trust. Now, a lot of people talk about the importance of psychological safety. You see that all over the news. You see it in the research, which is great. We're talking about, this is way more than that. This is, psychological safety is great. We're also talking about safe, and we're talking about significant. What's significant mean? Significant is having a sense of value, that you're valued, or that at least your contributions are valued. It's also about having a strong connection to something or someone that's greater than yourself, having a sense of belonging. That's what significance, so if you think back to your experience, no doubt most people can think about that team or that situation where they had a strong sense of both safety and a strong sense of significance. And the third one is you were situated. Well, what's situated? Situated is where you have clear direction. You're really good at, you know why you're there. You know what's expected of you. Your roles are clear. You have a clear focus. You can answer questions like, what's the point of this and why I'm here and what is my role in this? It's about having purpose and goals. Now it's not necessarily the big P purpose, like, because I think that can be hard to find, but just what am I doing next week? What are we doing in the classroom? What's on for next month, right? Being clear about that. And what we've come to understand is that when you're experiencing the three great states of safe, significant, and situated, you're doing your best. You're feeling your best. And this is the interesting thing to think about. It connects to something else. The three great states are important, but what's amazing is something else very important was happening to you in that moment. And we'll get back to this as we talk about key strategies. So safe, significant, and situated are a big piece of the environment that creates wellness, both in your relationships and in your environment. But something else important was really happening. And that was your needs were being met to some degree. So if you have needs for connection, need to be involved, a need maybe to have the last word, different needs. Your values were in alignment, values of collaboration, respect, integrity. No doubt when you think back to that greatest team moment, you can see and you can feel viscerally that values were being lived, values that you endorsed personally and professionally were being aligned, honored, and reinforced. Goals were being met. No kidding. Goals were, like I say, when we talk to people about their greatest, their goals were being knocked down. We were getting stuff done. It's a different word than stuff, but you know what I'm getting at, right? So needs were being met, values were in alignment, and goals were being met. Finally, what makes the greatest experience really powerful is that your strengths were probably being identified and leveraged. No doubt on that team, you were not only making a valuable contribution to that team, but your strengths were being identified and they were definitely being leveraged. Now, why is this so important? Needs, values, goals, and strengths are what we refer to as your forces of meaning. They're at the core of your well-being. So we're going to talk later about finding the meaning in your wellness, right? Finding the meaning in your wellness. And why is that important? Well, if you have a look at this slide, we're starting to make really important connections. In the opening quote, thank you, Miriam, it was great by Goldman, which is meaning and burnout. Meaning is an antidote to burnout. We're seeing that. Meaning and regulation are inextricably linked. They cannot be separated. And meaning and regulation are critical to both our well-being and our overall resilience. And these are more than just concepts. When you think back to your greatest moment, when you think back to the things that kept you safe, the people that kept you safe, when you think back to, you know, your needs, your values, your goals, and your strengths being leveraged, being identified, being activated, what's really important when we talk to thousands and thousands of people is this: it's not perfect times. Think back to that team. Were there no financial restraints? Were there no politically knee-jerk reactions? Were there no challenges in the environment of that working team? When we talk to people, a lot of people think that our greatest moments are connected to the non-stressful times. That's not necessarily true. What we're seeing about meaning over happiness is that meaning can happen in times of challenge and in times of uncertainty. And that's where it becomes absolutely essential for our wellness. So we're going to talk about finding the meaning in your wellness so that you can find and connect to the things that give you purpose, the things that keep you safe, significantly situated, and so that you can identify your own core four. What do I need right now? What's most important to me in this moment as an individual, as a teacher, as a community member? What values are critical to us? What are we hoping for during this, after this, beyond this? And more importantly, don't ever forget to focus on our strengths, because those are the things that are keeping us up a little bit, keeping us afloat. There's lots of things that are going on that are going well. So we got to start with, what are we doing well right now that's working and contributing to our sense of meaning, our regulation, our overall well-being, and our resilience. And we'll get to those strategies on how you can do that for yourself and for the people that are in your environment. Now, I'm gonna manage some expectations. I'm gonna say this is probably passing it over to Jean to talk about a little bit about uncertainty and the current context right now that everybody's living in. And we're gonna dip a bit. It's probably the only depressing part of the presentation, but it's only for a moment, and we're gonna move on. So Jean, I'm gonna pass it back to you to talk about uncertainty and what's currently happening now.
Right, great. Well, Steve, let me just reflect on I'm like you, I'm forgetting I'm presenting, I'm listening to you so intently. I really love that point, so many of the points, but the point that you made, Steve, about your greatest moment doesn't need to be picture perfect, Facebook worthy. You know, you can have it under lots of pressure. And in some ways, it reminds me of Csikszentmihalyi's sense of flow. And you can have flow in many, many different situations. But that connecting your meaning to well-being, and even when things aren't perfect, like they're not now, is, I think, a really hopeful and valuable message. So we go from this hope to be thinking about the uncertainty. So what we know about our brain is our brain does not like uncertainty. In fact, the fear is what our brain dislikes the most, and the fear of the unknown is probably the greatest fear of all. So let's look at this. The brain doesn't like uncertainty, and let's look at the three great states and say, well, are we feeling safe? No, we're not feeling safe. Are we feeling significant? No, we're not feeling significant. We used to know what to do as teachers. We had great tools that we used to be able to utilize. And now here we are, wham, bam, we have to be shifting our whole knowledge base into another way. Are we situated? Do we have that sense of purpose that people appreciate what you're doing? Are you kidding? Everybody's so freaking busy. They are just trying to hold on by their fingernails. So give yourself permission to say, what the heck is going on? No wonder you're exhausted, because I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about how stress works. So, you know, we saw that diagram before where we had the nice, the amygdala gets fired up, and then the hippocampus is supposed to come in and say, oh, it's okay, this is going to pass. Oh, it's okay, the danger's over. But hello, we keep hearing these new things, new cases, a second wave. Our amygdala is going nuts. It's saying we have no known thing that we can hang on to. The good news is that we can utilize our hippocampus in other ways, our new learning and memory in other ways, so that we can create that calm. We can come back to lend that calm to others. But what's so important is to recognize right now, you have the right to be feeling overwhelmed. You have the right, and it is completely understandable that you feel that there's too much being asked, that you've got decision fatigue. Don't ask me to make one more decision. So what does that mean in terms of our ability to be that bridge between and for kids? So the next slide is showing how these times have disrupted so much of what we see ourselves as educators. It has blown out of the water our safety, our sense of significance, and our sense of being situated. How has that come about? So if you look to see, the next slide shows that we need to find, as adults in our own lives and in our children's lives, way that we can become that co-regulator. And here's a way that my colleague Bruce Perry talks about it. We have stressors in our life all of the time. You know, a stressor is just something that turns your body system of watch out, change something in your physiology. I'm hot, I'm cold, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm scared. The body responds to all of that stimulus. What we know now is the stimulus of anxiety and fear. What we can do about those stimuli, that all that material, all that coming in through your senses, that we need to observe what is our own personal pattern of stress. And what we can do is be, as I say to kids that I'm working with, be the boss of that. So you can take this uncertainty and say, there's stuff here I cannot control, but there's other things I can control. So boom, you think about, how can I make the world more predictable? How can I have routine? What that does when you make your stressor more predictable, you moderate, you change the pattern of the stress, you make it tolerable, and through that tolerance, you become resilient. The other pattern of stress, of course, is to be overwhelmed, be discombobulated by it. So what we know when we've got this prolonged stress activation, as we have here, is that we get so exhausted. How many of you have experienced, you're on a roller coaster, you're fine one day and I'm managing it fine, and then boom. So please be kind to yourself. Expect more fatigue. Expect that you're not going to be able to focus as well. Expect more irritability from yourself and others, and be kind, be gentle with yourself and others. This is your brain speaking. Now, the other aspect of things that's really important to know is, you know, CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, talks about what we think affects how we feel, determines how we act. But what we also know and need to be aware of for ourselves and for our kids coming back is that how we feel affects how we think, and that determines how we act as well. This is called state-dependent function. What state are you in? Are you calm and alert? Or is your state right now that you're vigilant and anxious? That state is going to affect how you think and how you act. So as we move on to the next slide, what we have to start thinking about here is the role of emotion in our own world, as well as in the world of the kids coming back. But for your own mental health, it's really important to remember the neuroscience of emotion is teaching us tons of stuff. And Mary Helen Imordino Yang here is just top notch. And she's got a great TED talk if you want to follow up. So what she says, it's impossible to connect your brain to something meaningful if it doesn't have emotion. And the next slide, thanks, Steve. The next slide is really telling us, and I teach at the medical school, that when educators fail to appreciate the importance of students' emotions, they fail to appreciate a critical force in students' learning. What does this mean? Why am I sharing this about emotion right now? Well, when kids come back, I'm a child psychiatrist, and anybody who will listen to me is hearing that we need to be thinking about the emotional well-being of the kids, finding out, taking their emotional temperature. So what can we do? Well, first of all, we can learn a bit more about our own feelings. And I'm so excited. This EdCan conference in August is going to be astounding, guys. But what Mark Brackett, I'm learning lots from his work and his fabulous book, Permission to Feel. And what we can do now, and I'm hoping that one of the silver linings of COVID is that we start to learn more about our feelings and give ourselves permission to feel. And he has the ruler approach that he's developed through Yale. He's got a great talk with Brene Brown, if you're a fan of Brene Brown, a great podcast. But what he says is what we want our kids to understand. But what we're recognizing, adults are not that good at labeling and understanding their own feelings. So he talks about this recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, and finally regulating emotion. So what can we do? We can learn about emotion. We can be more permissive about our own feelings. We can recognize that the kids who are coming back to school are going to have experienced lots of feelings. They're going to have lots of feelings. And if we try and jump into just stuffing the duck, is what I call stuffing the curriculum into them, then we're going to miss not only a great learning opportunity, but we are not going to have them as their best self, nor if we don't recognize our own emotions, we will not be our best self either. So where can we go from here? Over to Steve.
Thank you, Jean. Very, very much. I love it. Great work by Mark Brackett. Great work by you, Jean. I just wanted to slow down a bit because we've covered a lot of area in a very short period of time. So I'm glad that this is being recorded, and thank you, Foundation, for allowing people to access this after, because there's a lot of stuff. Starting with, getting to the core, we're talking about things that are very critical to our well-being. And I'm just going to summarize a couple of things as human beings to connect with your purpose, right? Those questions that we showed at the beginning, take some time over your favorite beverage, coffee, water, maybe a martini, I don't know, whatever it is, to really think about what brought you there, what keeps you there, and what are the things that you want to carry out. I also like what Jean's saying, cut yourself some slack. We're all human. Stress is a normal reaction. What we're experiencing is a normal reaction to a very abnormal circumstance. So I think it's really great, and we got some questions to come up for you to ask yourselves in just a moment, but give yourselves a break, give other people a break, and by all means, we've got to give kids a break so that we can be that bridge that we talked about, so that when they're dysregulated, we can be the regulator. We can be the brain they need in those moments to be able to bridge that and help them cope and help develop that resilience. The other thing is we went over the 3 great states and core 4. We're going to come back to that. Key strategies. We know that the 3 great states are so critical in our relationships and in our environment that it's important for us to start with us, as Jean's saying, right? Where do I feel safe? Where do I find, what relationships provide safety? Where do I feel a sense of significance? Where do I feel valued and valuable? Where do I find situatedness? Now, what's important is, remember I said earlier that when those things are happening, the 3 great states, you can also connect with your core 4. What do I need? What's most important to me? So let's get into some practical strategies for the people that you care for your own kids and for the kids in the classroom. So we're going to start with significant. Now, some people say, Steve, you talk about safe, significant, situated. Why do you often start with significant as a strategy? Well, it's one of the most accessible. When I met Jean, one of the things, I had to wait almost 20 minutes for her to get to me because she made her rounds smiling at every child in the restaurant. Now, it took 20 minutes, but I think she probably got to about 15 or 20. And I asked her what she was doing, and she said, smiling in the eyes of children makes a massive difference, right? Saying thank you more often, right? Maintaining a positive and an optimistic attitude whenever we can. And I think for some of these, it's important to put these 4 words in the end, to the extent possible, right? We do what we can to the extent possible. Use their name more often. This is something that is so, so profound. It's so simple that when we use somebody's given name or the name that they prefer more often, it creates a stronger connection in good times and even not so good times. Connect before you correct. Jean and I talk about this all the time. We're often correcting kids. We're giving instructions, we're teaching classes. And when we stop to think, how many times have we connected to the number of times we've corrected? And it's actually quite backwards. So what we try to encourage is for people to do 3 connects before they do a correct, right? That's our connect correct ratio. Focus more on what's going well versus not. It's easy in the COVID times to focus on what's not going well, but we really got to make an effort to start with, hey, what's going well? Even just a little bit. That will create a sense of significance within relationships and the environment. Situated. Provide flexible and structure and routine. As our brains need, and Jean said it, the brain just craves predictability and routine and certainty to the extent possible. Make things as predictable and planned. Follow through on commitments. Involve student in planning and decision-making to the extent possible. Collaborate on meaningful goals that are important to them. And we added important to them because we have lots of goals for us. We have the curriculum, we have lessons, we have a lot of things. It's important. What part of what we're doing is important to them? How can we collaborate with them on meaningful goals? Ensure students have a voice and a personal sense of agency. We have to get them involved to the extent possible. Give them something fun to look forward to, right? Even as adults, sometimes when we're down, we'll be realizing, what's wrong? And you realize, oh, I don't have anything in the calendar. I don't know when I'm seeing my friends next. I don't know when I'm doing an activity next. And safe. Just by doing those above things, by focusing on significant and situated, we reinforce and we sustain a sense of safety. One of the things that gets missed, we get busy and busy, is just stopping and making sure we start with, how are you? How are you doing? Check in, right? Reinforce how great it is to see them. Light up when you see them, right? Don't forget to reinforce how important they are. Slow the pace. I always say, go slow to go fast, right? If we can connect before we correct, the correcting will come easy. The teaching, the learning will come easy. When we create the 3 great states and lock into the core 4, learning happens. It creates the great conditions. Regularly perception check, and be sure to, and you'll hear Jean say this often, and I say it often, lend them your calm. Just as Jean was saying earlier, the brain, stress has a contagious effect, but so does a positive attitude, and so does positivity. And so does calmness, very contagious. So we got to be sure what we are giving people to catch. We want them to catch calmness, just as we want them to catch kindness, right? Remember, as we said at the beginning, your well-being is inextricably linked to their well-being. And I think this is important as well, as we follow the cascade effect down, that all roads lead to the leader, and leaders have leaders, right? So principals and vice principals to teachers, teachers to students, right? Take care of yourself. This question, given the context now, there's lots of weird behavior happening. There's people acting out there. We're a little bit off. We were a little bit off balance before COVID, but COVID hasn't helped. And now with all of this, as Jean said earlier, giving us, expecting irritability, expecting us to just not be at our best, and that's okay. When we're dealing with kids especially, it's critical to ask this question. Don't ask what's wrong, ask what's going on. So if we believe that behavior it has a reason, if we believe that behavior happens in a context, and if we believe that behavior is being propelled or motivated by a need, an unmet need or a met need, a value, a goal, or a strength, it's important for us to take a positive approach to inquiry. Don't ask what's wrong. Let's just find out what's going on, okay? And this is what's critical for us. As we move into understanding, we all have a perception of the crisis. We have our own experience. We have our perspective, and then there's their experience and their story. Tuning into what we call the core 4, if we know that core 4 is at the center of wellness, at the center of meaning, at the center of resilience, then it's so critical for us to access their core 4. And there's some questions that you can ask that can get you directly to the core 4. Always the first question, we encourage people, especially in negative times, to look for the good because it's happening. What's going well? What do they need, right? What do they need right now? What are they needing in this moment? What's most important to them as they carry out their work, as they come to school, as they are at home, as they are online? And what are they hoping for moment to moment, right now, tomorrow, next week, right? Those questions will help bring you, when you keep it safe, when you keep it significant, when you keep it situated, will provide access to their core four. It'll allow us to create meaning by understanding their experience. It will help us to respond, help us to regulate, and help us to create conditions where they're going to learn even in crisis and stressful times. Now, before I pass it over to Jean, my beautiful friend and esteemed colleague, to add to some of these strategies, I want to say and just really encourage you, don't forget about you. Their regulation is dependent upon our regulation. So you can use these questions on yourself. What's going well for me right now? What do I need right now? What's most important to me at this moment, right? And what am I hoping for, right? Connecting with your core four will help you to set and connect to your meaning, right? Will help you regulate, okay? So I'm hope that makes sense. We're gonna open it up to questions soon. I'm gonna pass it over to Jean to either build on that and continue offering some strategies from her perspective.
Great, thanks, Steve. That's so great. And you know, that last piece that you were talking about, the core four and the you know, what's going well, what do they need, what's most important, what are you hoping for? It reminds me so much of the resilience research that we've talked about. And I saw a TEDx talk by Dr. Lucy Hone, H-O-N-E. And she was a resilience researcher in New Zealand, and she had a tragedy in her family. Her daughter was killed in a car accident, and she said what she's learned about resilient people, and it is, you've nailed it. You've nailed it with these the core four and the three great states, because what she has learned personally is that resilient people realize that bad things happen. Life is not perfect. It's not storybook. So don't expect it to be going well all of the time, but then do look at what is going well. And she also, the second thing that she talked about is that resilient people ask, is this what I'm going to do helping me or harming me? So really digging in to that sense of meaning. And then the big focus on, is what I am focusing on something that I can control or not control? So it just really struck me, that's a bit off script, but it really struck me about how tightly connected what you're talking about is to what we know about resilience. So this is on the resource I want to leave with everyone. It's from Ontario, where I'm from, School Mental Health Ontario. You can Google them, but this is just some very practical strategies. Look after yourself. Find a calm place where you feel the most relaxed. You know, if we were to do a poll, if that was able to, how many of us as adults know where our calm place is? Practice tensing and then relaxing to know what the difference is. Just breathe. Take a moment for gratitude. We'll close with something there. Just notice 5 things that you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you feel, 2 things you touch and smell, and 1 thing you taste. Just listen. Then there's this radical concept called let it go, radical acceptance. And then do a 4-finger affirmation. I'm loved today. I believe in me. I got up out of bed this morning. I had a great time presenting with my good friend, Steve. Breathe, listen, smile, love, and say, I can handle it. You know, all of these things are connected to positive bias. You know, Steve talked to us about negative bias. Our brain is searching for negative, and it kind of sticks like Velcro. What we want to do is help you think about things that are going to shift into that positive bias. Now, there's another great resource, 2 great resources in the next slide to talk about. And that is from the National Health Services, the learn.formentalhealth.com. And then here's a great article, that was written in Psychology Today, and it's called The Pandemic Toolkit Parents Need. And so just to kind of finish up and think about routine, remember the brain wants predictability, so put it into routine. You need to sleep, not like a baby, you know, that's because, you know, I've got 5 grandchildren and babies don't sleep so well, but sleep well. Exercise releases BDNF, brain growth, miracle growth for the brain. Find that calm. Have routines like family meals together, and reach out to others. Reach out to others. We know that when we reach out to others, that we are increasing the different neurotransmitters in the brain. Limit, limit, limit your media exposure. It's not good for you. It's not, and especially limit it when kids are around, because they don't know that it's on a cycle. They think each time they hear a news story, it's a new news story. And then always remember, your focus determines your reality. So just like Dr. Hone says, what can I control? Am I going to be forward seeking, thinking about the future? Am I going to be present in the moment, or am I going to ruminate about things I can't control? So to finish off, we again together want to be saying a huge thank you, thank you, thank you for the work that you do. And to remind you that if you can stop, be present, and just take in the good of the moment, then we know that that changes you, that changes your brain. Gratitude can change everything. The neurobiology of gratitude is fascinating to look at. It releases healthy stuff in your brain. So be present, stop all the noise, and together we can actually do something that makes a difference in our own lives, be better for ourselves, and be better for the children that we care for.
Yeah. Thank you, Jean. I just wanted to reiterate that we thank people all the time, and it's not a strategy, it's not gimmicky. As Jean was saying, it releases what I call neurococaine, right? It releases the best of the best, the serotonin, dopamine, and if we're lucky, oxytocin. We want to say thank you, and we want you to know that gratitude has teeth, and to focus on the good, and what you focus is what we create. And I think that that's something that we want to reinforce, is to focus on the positive. The one thing that makes gratitude very powerful, if you think about the 3 great states in Core 4, and I can't wait to share more of that stuff with you folks, is that it creates the 3 great states immediately. When you thank somebody for something that they chose to do, it creates a great, powerful sense of significance. It connects them to what it is they're doing, they're situated, and it makes them feel good. It increases trust, and it increases all the other good things, and it creates a meaningful experience. So we can't play it down, it's got teeth. So I think what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go into a discussion. I'm gonna pass it over to, I'm not sure, Miriam, are you there? And Jennifer? To see if
yes.
Okay, you're awesome. We wanted to bring this plane in a little bit early so that we could open it up to some questions and some great discussion. How best do you want to do that? Do you want me to stop sharing? Do you want to take over? Do you want to leave this up? What is your preference?
I will take over control in the ways that I can, which is the screen. While we're doing that, we've been trying to respond to the Q&As and wanted to share some of the patterns of what people were feeling at the beginning of this experience. And then I'll invite our participants to put any questions, curiosities that they have into either the chat or the Q&A. We're monitoring both. But Stephan and Dr. Clinton, we've seen a couple of themes. There's a lot of anxiety, obviously, around the uncertainty, and lots of patterns describing how that fatigue with the unknown and the factors that are outside of their control is causing. There's also a good, strong pattern of holding mixed feelings. So things that seem very polar and sometimes opposite or contradictory of each other. So both hope and dismay, hope and anxiety. And so there's a lot of the fluctuation of emotions between that kind of span, and just wiring our brains to know that we can hold both, and that there isn't, that they don't necessarily have to happen in isolation of each other. There's a lot of description too around pride of being a part of a profession in education, which I share, that has, Jen, Paul and I often joke about the power of the pivot, the importance of being agile and being adaptable, and educators are definitely that. this moment to support students. There's pride in that, and there's also a valuing of community and connection with fellow educators. Many identifying that has been what has helped them with the isolation, and to continue to just be able to show up and try to teach. And then the other strong pattern I wanted to share with you all to set the tone for our interactive Q&A is around the conversation of isolation and the human craving. So we talked a lot about what the brain craves, but also talking a lot about what we crave as humans, as social creatures who are wired to take cues from others, and how much that informs our emotional well-being. I think also informs our meaning, right? If we know that we can provide direct care and we see it alleviated in a child, that smiling into the eyes, if you will. So the pattern is really talking about that loss of in-person experience. And while there's some benefits to this new model and having remote connection, because you can connect with more people, that isolation that's caused by not being in community and sharing space and physical presence with each other. So those are some of the patterns that I noticed. I'll give Jen a second to see wants to add, and then we'll put into the chat, we have one question coming in, and then I'll start to share our screen. So we have one open question that's really talking about how can we support children with trauma at home coming back to school. So there's this extra level of the stressors we're talking about in the neuroscience, and then the trauma on top of that, and how that can compound. You know, I think we're all in agreement that we're going to see more needs, more severity of those needs, and definitely trauma. So I'll leave that to you to comment on to start.
I'd love, thank you, Miriam. I wanted to pass over to Jean one thing I think she's great at talking about is that the brain being a social organ and connection gene, and why we need that so badly. So yeah, I wanted to pass that. I wanted to know if we can just comment on some of those themes that people have demonstrated so that they can feel acknowledged and validated in that. And then I would like to also just speak a little bit to the difference between anxiety and fear, and what we can do about that as well. So Jean, would you like to comment on some of those themes, Jean?
Yeah, well, I think a couple of things. As you say, Steve, we know that the brain is a social organ, that we as a species are a very social species, that we know that loneliness and prolonged isolation actually affects the expression of our DNA. I mean, that's how much we absolutely need to be connected. And so I think what most people and the people in the sciences that I read are saying, that we need to be physically distant, but socially and emotionally connected. So for those who are feeling that isolation, that reaching out to others, being intentional, even if it's just a Zoom call, just to share how your week has gone. It doesn't need to be huge big doses of meaningful interaction, just small doses of how you doing. I hear you're there. I'm thinking about you. Small doses make a difference. Those bursts of relational connection makes a huge difference. So, talking about the kids in trauma, I think that we know so much about the impact that trauma has, and similar to the question that Steve poses, in the trauma field, we talk about, don't ask what's wrong with you, but ask rather what has happened to you. And I think that has to be, what has happened to you has to be the opening heart, the open-heartedness when kids come back. That we need to be spending our time not worrying about curricular expectations, but really knowing that we need to make those kids feel safe, feel significant, and feel situated first and foremost. That we need to not become trauma therapists, but this is going to be a time when you need to lend your calm big time. when you need to be saying, I'm reaching out to this kid and he's not coming back to me, particularly with some of the things that have gone on over the past couple of weeks. Don't take it personally. Still bring that humanity, that humaneness to your interacting. And it is connect before you correct. Ask the kids, what has happened to you? Steve, you're agreeing.
Not bad, Jean. That was not bad. That's why I passed it over to Jean. Yeah, awesome. That was beautiful, Jean. And I think in addition to what you're saying, let's keep it simple. Like if you're feeling helpless, reach out and help someone and help yourself. Like just by connecting with someone else, we're helping ourselves. And that's critical. That's a 2-for-1. I also think that as what Jean's saying is that tuning into the child's experience is critical. They are not us. Our fears are not their fears. And I think that's critical because a lot of people think that, I'm afraid that they're not going to respond well or they're not going to transition well. Those are all assumptions. We have to tune into what do they need? What are they experiencing? And our experience isn't their experience. So just as we have to lend them our calm, we can't lend them our anxiety because it's not theirs and they shouldn't be carrying it. So that's why it's so critical for us to tune into their experience of the situation so that we can respond, enable, and help co-regulate. That leads into the anxiety versus fear. And I think a lot of people are saying that. Like everybody we talk to, I'm anxious about this, going to school, anxious about leaving my pets alone, anxious about everything. There's a big difference between fear and anxiety, and that's important for us to know. Fear is a real physical and psychological, emotional reaction to an immediate danger. That's fear. Anxiety is a psychological response to perceived danger. It's all the what ifs. It's all what if this happens, what if this happens? And we say to people, deal with what is, not with what if. Because if we focus on the what ifs, they will put the amygdala into the driver's seat, putting our hippocampus to sleep and letting it just take over. And it leads me to my last point, which is the hippocampus is critical for learning and memory, for our ability to cope, and also our ability to find meaning in a crisis. But remember, the hippocampus, everything's gonna be okay, gets very thin if we don't have real experience to back it up. So that's why we have to focus on the successes, focus on the positives, so that we can strengthen not only our relationships with the people we're responsible for, that we can help co-develop their brain as we're going through this. So that's kind of what I thought about that. But,
yeah, well, and Steve, it reminds me as well, though, of the thing that I think Maya Angelou first said, and that is every child needs at least one adult whose eyes light up when they enter the room, and when you've got that, when you've got those eyes lighting up when the kids are coming back who have experienced trauma, then you have an attitude of understanding their anxiety about what might be happening, and you take away the fear of the uncertainty about what this person is going to be like.
Dr. Clinton, can I comment on that?
Yeah.
We see this every day, like in a normal school day, right? Before we were released from COVID. And so kids come in and they get that connection every day from us, as well as our colleague next door, when we step out during passing periods or whatnot. And so I really, really liked what you said about making an effort. As teachers, you are not the only one feeling isolated. Your colleagues are all feeling isolated. So making that phone call, sending that text message goes a long way to help with that.
Great, thanks, Jen.
I think there's also, I appreciate that you all mentioned earlier giving educators permission to do these things. And it's not ironic that Mark Beckett's book is Permission to Feel either. It's so interesting as educators who often are granting permission, that we also feel like we have to have that permission, because as adults, as educators, we feel like we should have it all together and we should be this model of stoic, professionalism. And there is this piece of you have to humanize your professionalism. So I think a lot of what you're saying too, for the trauma response, the trauma responsiveness for children, we actually need to be explicitly thinking about our trauma responsiveness to the adults that we're going to be interacting with, and really kind of building space between what we see, whatever behavior that we're seeing, and some space before we react, to just pause and say, something else is contributing. There's more going on here. What is going on? Because our normal reaction is probably going to just exacerbate the stress that everyone is experiencing in that situation. So this my long way of saying we have to build in that space for ourselves to pause with other adults in ways that we probably aren't accustomed to, and then some grace for them and ourselves to regulate with the trauma that we've all navigated through this experience and through what's continuing in our country and across the world, right? So that was the piece. I think the other thought I had, Stephen, you inspired this great, what is and what if, and all of the anxieties versus the fears. And I think we all need a practical strategy for externalizing those things. Otherwise, our brain just carries it. And it's these unclosed loops that continue to fire, trying to find answers.
They're exhausting.
When they're not there. And it is very exhausting, fatiguing, and then it just compounds all of the cycle that you all were sharing in terms of how our stress goes up. And we just don't realize that that's kind of those unclosed loops in the background, tolling at our energy on the regular.
Yeah.
So how do you distinguish between the two?
How do
Well, I'm just saying, between the fear and the anxiety. And
yeah, I think you catch yourself. I mean, one of the simplest things is, and I think there's two things there. We use something called the $1 billion question when we're worried about someone else, and that's, what do I know about this from this person's perspective? Now the this is whatever you're concerned about. The answer is always nothing until you talk to them. Now, why is that so powerful? As Jean said, what we think affects how we feel, determines how we act. So if I think that my child's scared and unprepared and overwhelmed, that just gets away on me, versus what do I know about her doing that from her perspective? Nothing. It shuts the amygdala off from reacting, and it puts us back into control. The one around the what ifs and the, what is versus what if, I like what Tversky says. He said, Amos Tversky used to say, why would I worry about something and have to experience it twice? So that was really helpful for me from a practical perspective. But the other one is, we catch ourselves doing what ifs all the time. Because it sounds like that, Jennifer. It sounds like, what if, oh my God, what if? And just by acknowledging that that's not a what is the first part of that battle, right? It's to get back into the prefrontal part of your cortex. And as I was saying, giving that hippocampus some strength, right? By focusing on what is, not with what if, okay? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that was helpful, but I'm gonna tell myself in my brain, Jennifer, that it was absolutely helpful. Yes. All right.
Yeah. So we have some more thoughts from the Q&A and from the chat that I'd like to share. So one is talking about basically loving the 3 S's. It really helps, and practical suggestions for if we are a screen, or if your school district is in a screen place, wanting to know ways to build that brain resiliency and that functionality in terms of, should we do more breaks, more physical exercise, more ways to increase our resiliency or our energy reserve, if you will. So just a curiosity about practical strategies, especially as we're going to have more screen time, which we all know can counteract a lot of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and Jean, I'm going to just pass over to you. I love how you talk about the power of repair. So, and how critical that is, if you wanted to share that.
Yeah. So two ways to go with this, Miriam. It's a great question. So one is absolutely that, as we know that kids are going to be spending more time on screens, the predominant thought needs to be, do we have balance of the physical, emotional, all of the things in our pattern, in our program, in our routines. So we say this to parents as well as we'll be saying this to educators. So there needs to be absolutely physical breaks in the day. There needs to be exciting and fun things to do. And we need to, there's a great paper that Michael Fullen and Joanne Quinn just released for Microsoft, Reimagining Education. And really it is all about thinking about how can we reimagine education. So what if we got it wrong? What if we muck up? We have a magnificent capacity through relationships to create repair, to say, let me take a second run at that. Let me, as I would say to my kids, okay, you know what? I think I screwed that up. Can we try again? That's a language that I might use. I'm not probably supposed to use here, but the power of repair, to say from a humanity and a humane point of view, I made a mistake. I am sorry for that, but we can learn together from the mistakes. Mistakes kids need to know can happen and are not bad. We learn from our experiences and our mistakes by examining them, and we have to model that for kids. But repair is huge. So thanks for bringing that up, Steve. And we have a new screen, so I think it is wrap
well,
up.
we're reaching the end of our planned time together. I know we'll be available a little bit longer and we can do this Q&A, but before we lose people who are scheduled back to back, I wanted to just interject a little promotion of, if this was helpful, if it was useful to you, thank you, let us know, because we really want to continue to find solutions that support educators' well-being as they sit in service of our students' well-being. A little not so shameless plug for an amazing conference that the IM Foundation is putting together to bring similar like-minded folks into your space with really no barriers. Remote is allowing us to reach more people, and hopefully at a more cost-effective way so more people can join. We do have a couple of things, but I wanted to make this available. All the resources will be there. We do have additional Q&A, and I know Jean and Stephen, we have you for a little bit. One of the common things that has come up in the Q&A is around, similar to what Jen was talking about in terms of fear and anxiety. When is stress beneficial? Because it can be. Stress can stretch us, and stress has stretched us in this space. And like Stephen, you were talking about with, you know, some of our most formative and transformative moments and our happiest, joyous, fulfilling. I don't like the word happy. So some of our most fulfilling moments or meaningful moments have come through difficult times, right? Yeah. And so this idea of raising up our children and teaching them to see the power of stress versus the distress, and not being so soft, you know, wanting to encourage their resilience and not their bubble protection, if you will. So, which I say with a little bit of irony as we're going into a world that we're probably going to have plastic everywhere. So I get that, but that conversation of distress versus stress and how we can really teach kids about what's happening in these stress moments so that they can build their strength from it.
Well,
if you all have thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think first of all, stress, we need stress to grow. So stress is not a bad thing. Stress and the experience of it is our body's way of saying, hey, something important is going on and we need to pay attention to it. So I think that's really important that we don't make stress a bad thing. It's about stress that's supported, stress that's tolerable, stress that's meaningful, stress that can be buffered, right? I think that's what it is. Distress is the reaction to unsupported stress or prolonged stress. That's what it is, just like dysregulation is. So I think it's really critical to make that distinction, that not all stress is bad. It's the perception of stress and the prolonged experience of unsupported stress where we start to edge into the negative experience of stress. And also, I think I'm just going to pass it over to Jean. We've talked about this quite a bit, and I love the way that she responds to this.
Yeah, so do you know, I think first of all, Miriam, I want to know why you don't like the word happy. But no, we'll talk about that another time.
I'm with her on that one. I'm with her on that one. Yeah.
I like the word happy. I just strive for joy and contentment. You know, those moments of joy and contentment creating meaningful, because happy sets an expectation that you're supposed to be smiley, sunshiny all the time. And
I just couldn't let it go as a shrink, you know.
It's vibes. My therapist would appreciate it.
Anyway, so I think that Steve has really captured it. I would add only that the Harvard Center on the Developing Child is a fabulous resource. They've got lots of terrific papers and videos, and one of their videos and papers is about stress and the developing brain, and it affects throughout the years. So they talk about 3 types of stress: positive stress, the kind of stress we're talking about; tolerable stress, which is stressors that are buffered by relationships, as Steve said. And the stress that we worry most about is the red letter stress, that is toxic stress, where you've got prolonged activation of the stress system, that's the adrenaline and the cortisol with the amygdala firing, and you don't have it buffered by relationship, by connection, by access to resources. So it's that toxic stress. What we don't know is what is toxic. When do you move from tolerable to toxic? Who is going to find this tolerable and who's going to find this toxic? But what we do know is that by bringing in relationship, connection, by bringing in safety, significance, and situated, then you're buffering whichever stress you have. But man, oh man, do we need to have stress or stressors so that we can create the predictability of the pattern, the stress activation pattern.
Yeah, that's sorry. That was awesome, Jean. I'm still thinking about happiness. I just wanted to say I'm with Miriam on that, because when happiness meets fear, it gets obliterated. When when fear meets meaning, meaning beats fear every time.
Yeah. It's like culture eats strategy for breakfast.
And lunch and dinner.
Yeah.
And for a midnight snack.
Right. Great. Thank you.
So in our waning moments, I mean, we could talk all day, but I know that our availability with you, those of you who have been with us, thank you. If this was helpful, Stephan and Jean will be doing more intensive sessions at the EdWell conference. So good just to promote that, because they'll be going more deeper in this work, more deeper grammatically. There's a discussion here about this. It talks about that professionalism and that professional responsibility to take care of ourselves in order to be able to show up and to support students. So just a little bit talking here, a question about, is it important for adults to take steps to care for their own mental health challenges in order to be available to their the children they help? I'm going to emphatically answer yes. I have lived this experience. It's important. I think one of the things I said to Jen when we first met is you can do anything. And we educators have proven that, but we can't do everything. And we definitely can't do everything in isolation or in disconnection. And if we are not well, we will create unwell conditions for the people that we interact with. And our responsibility is to be as well as we can be so that we can continue to do the powerful and meaningful work we need to do. I don't know if you all have anything to add.
I would love to add, I would love to make a distinction. I think it's more than a professional responsibility. It's an ethical responsibility.
It is an ethical.
And I think we need to think of wellness as an ethical responsibility. And, you know, that's not to make people feel bad. I mean, you know, we have that responsibility already. It's just about being aware of it and being able to respond to it. The book that I wrote came by accident. You know, a child's wellness is inextricably linked to the person that is performing in their space and relating to them in their space. Just as a teacher's wellness and their practice decisions to provide great education is inextricably linked to the environment and the relationships they have with the people that are responsible for them. Right? So there is that cascade effect. And I think if we think about it, that it's an ethical responsibility, that if everybody just takes it that much more seriously, we'd be better off. So that's,
well, it will improve the culture of the school.
Absolutely.
The entire school.
The
Absolutely.
entire school. So what I would add to this conversation is that collaborative professionalism is the way to go. We should be thinking about, we do this together as an ethical profession, that we work collaboratively with others, because together we go faster, we go further. So collaboration, it's not an individual, but a collective experience. And there's a great book, by the way, by Andy Hargreaves and Michael Fullen on this, but
all right, so we're getting a lot of appreciation in the chat, talking about how this was so timely for a lot of what people need and want. And then I'm looking through to see if we've missed anything. I don't think we have. I'll give that awkward wait time to see if there's anything that comes in. I think the last thing is something that this group in planning this webinar has talked about a lot, is in educators, there seems to be an aversion to self-care, the word, and self-compassion. And I've seen it when we've done workshops too, even when we're supposed to take a mindful breath. I feel it in myself, this resistance to this soft, fuzzy stuff. And there's a renaming that we need to do around this in terms of self-care. It isn't this external pedicure, although I would love one right now, or massages or any of those things. That's the external, like, caring. But the self-care is really this internal tending to what's coming up for you, what is this prevalent emotional feeling, managing yourself and your feelings so that others aren't responsible for that, but that you can manage that and be that bridge, that regulator, that co-regulator that was described in the presentation.
Yeah, I would just say be cautious around someone that we're individually responsible for our own wellness. We have to implicate the environment that we're in.
Right.
I think that's part of the problem, is that we feel blame and we feel judged and we feel criticized for not being well when we don't implicate a system that does not help support a meaningful experience. I mean, the research is overwhelming. And so I just had to say that. You're absolutely right. It's more than green tea and yoga, for sure.
Oh
right?
my gosh, yes.
And I think, Jennifer, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to make sure teachers know that the impact that they truly can have on a whole building, and not just their classroom. And so I want them to give them the permission to express those things and to know that they have an influence, and to not be afraid to participate, to collaborate, and to really share how they feel and what they think would be best for the school.
Yeah, and Jennifer, I absolutely am with you 100%. We can't fail to implicate the leaders of that school, because it's one thing to say speak up and collaborate, but if you're not feeling safe enough or you're not feeling significant, and I've been to hundreds of schools where teachers want that, they want to say something, and then when you say have you said something, they do this, right? And I'm just being if I don't own this, if we don't own the reality of culture and the reality of leadership to do what we're saying teachers need to provide for children, we're missing a really big part of the puzzle, and it won't change. So you're absolutely right. I'm with you on that one. I just want to say, hey, leaders, we got to create safe, significant, situated so that we can activate the potential of the people that showed up every day to give the kids the best of all of them. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're truly amazing people.
They are.
We work with fantastic individuals.
I think that the world and the model of education has changed significantly, and we need to catch up and recognize that no longer are teachers just deliverers of content, but they're human developers. That we've got a shift now to say that literacy, numeracy, science, and these things that are easy to measure are not the exclusive things that education should be about. We need to be talking about social and emotional learning and well-being, and helping kids being good at learning as well as good at life. And that also, we need a shift to say that it's not just about an automaton up at the front of the class, but a living, breathing human being who brings their own self and their own blessings to that interaction. So I think this is part of the seed wave of change that we're seeing in education, and hopefully an outcome of COVID, it will have more priority. And so, kudos to you guys in the EdCan conference for making this the focus.
Yes. Absolutely, I endorse that. I think what you're doing with the IM Foundation is amazing, and it's great. It's a big part of the solution, for sure, prioritizing your pillars.
Well, that's a great transition. Paul, I'm going to ask you to put up the EdWell conference. We had one, or actually there's a prompt just to check out with you all before we say goodbye. The first thing is, if you want to put into the chat, how are you feeling right now? Just as a calibration of, did this improve? Everything I'm seeing so far in the comments is that people are finding this really meaningful and useful, which was our goal for today. So you all get gold stars. Thank you for that. If you want to put in the chat how you're feeling and where you're from, so we can see what kind of impact we're having, and how broad we can reach and share this message, that would be fantastic. We do have the EdWell conference coming up in August. We're going to be filming that and streaming it, so you all can join. list of speakers is amazing. Never in my time in education, over 17 years, have I seen such great minds coming together, so easily accessible. So you don't have to be the one teacher who got picked to be able to travel somewhere. You can all sit from the comfort of your couch and kind of replay and go through things, but there will be interactive components, so you can get questions asked. You can be able to interface with these great thinkers, researchers, and leaders of our thought partnership. So I just can't sell this enough. I'm really enthusiastic for myself. I'm selfishly really excited about this for my well-being, but we hope that we can create more solutions that support educator well-being in service of student well-being. With that, I see a lot of comments coming in terms of how people are feeling, which is fantastic. I think the last thing we wanted to do, or maybe this is a last thought, it was interesting, Dr. Jean, when you're talking about, you know, how our brain craves stability, normality, routine, all of those things. And sometimes by that craving, it seeks out things that aren't healthy for us, right? It will find things that are familiar because that's known. And one of the things that I want to encourage us as educators and people thinking about well-being is to have the permission to let go of the things that might feel very familiar, but are no longer functional, to your point, Jean, about this great shift in education and some of the changes that it's creating. So I'll leave the space if anyone wants to add to that. And if not, this is that awkward wait time that I like to fill with talking so people feel comfortable, because silence can be scary.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, just coming back to the core four, it's part of the work that I do, is finding them. When you find the meaning, you know, we have a lot of shoulds. I should do this, I should do this. It starts to become bullshit, right? And, you know, before we stop and let go, because I like the idea of letting go of things, is finding the meaning in what we're letting go of. Is it a need driving this? Is it a value driving this? Is it a goal drive? Is it a strength? And I think once we understand, you can't really leave a place unless you arrive, right? So you can't leave that place that you want to leave of, whether it's behavior or thinking or a pattern, whether it's familiar or not. I think once you find the meaning, you can start to understand what's important to me, what's more important to me in this moment. And it just becomes a choice, right? Based on meaning and what's most meaningful. So that's something that comes to mind. Thank you, Miriam.
Wow, what a way to end. You can't leave a place till you've arrived. Fantastic, Steve.
That's a Stevie D original, by the way. So if you want to,
I'm really taking away the bullshits, because I've really reflected in my own around if should is a part of it, there's already something there that's not really great.
It's also an external force. A should does not come from within, it comes from the outside. So when you hear that, that's why it doesn't feel so good.
Yeah, it's a language of all the things that are not the right meaning places, right? Where you get your meaning. Well, looks like we are getting a lot of comments around how helpful this was and what people are holding on to, especially with the 3 S's. People from all over, including Canada, your part of the world, some people in Florida and Ontario. I'm really just pleased with how today has gone and how this is shaping out to support people. So with that, I'm gonna end today with a gratitude. I hope as you start to sign off that you also press save on the things that you've gained from today, the positive moments during this time that we've shared, or even the gratitude, because that will help with all of the things we're talking about to highlight the positive and be able to process the things that aren't positive for us, but that we need to put in their place so that they don't control how we're regulating ourselves. So thank you, many gratitude. And with that, no further ado, everything can be found on the IM website. Many thanks, Stephen. Many thanks, Jean. We'll see you in August at the conference.
Thank you.
And again, a great gratitude for IM Foundation for the work they're doing to support educators and well-being.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good day.